Pod Save the World is brought to you by Soothe. Tons of people who work desk jobs or spend the majority of their time sitting wonder how bad that is for your health. If you play sports or work out a lot, you know how sore you can get and how that can trigger injuries. Soothe is an on-demand massage service that delivers a hand-selected, licensed, and experienced massage therapist to you in the comfort of your own home, hotel, or office in as little as an hour. I did this once. It was actually the Sunday after your wedding, and it was a delightful experience.
You had Soothe come to your house?
People came to my home. They set up trays. I felt deeply uncomfortable when it started and deeply comfortable during the massage because it was a wonderful experience.
Wow.
Soothe shows up with everything. They bring the table, the sheets, the oil, even music. You can unwind no matter where you are. You choose the kind of massage you want, from Swedish and sports to deep tissue and more. You can even opt for a couples massage, set the length of your massage, and you get to pick the gender of your therapist.
Emily and I, John's wife, Emily, and I, we were, I would say, moments away from pulling the trigger on a couples massage. I think we were both feeling each other out as to whether we really were going to do it. And we walked away. We walked away from it. We were right there, but then we walked away. But I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, Hannah actually booked ours with a couple massage, and then I should note there's not a weekend that goes by where she doesn't float. Hey, should we just get massaged this weekend? Like it's a new idea.
Emily
like
does
I've
the same
never
thing.
thought of that. Yeah. Therapists can earn over 3.5 times what they'd make at a spa while maintaining incredible schedule flexibility. That means you can even book a massage for 10 p.m. on a Wednesday. That feels arbitrary. They also bring the best therapists to the Soothe Network. Book a massage as soon as today. Our listeners are getting a special offer that'll get you $20 off your first massage when you use the code CrookedWorld. Download Soothe, SOOTHE, in the iOS app or Google Play Store, and be sure to use my code CrookedWorld to get $20 off your first massage. Soothe, spa quality massage, anytime, anywhere. Welcome back to Pod Save the World. This is Tommy Vietor. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. My guest this week is Derek Chollet. I will go through his resume with you later. Initially, this conversation was going to be a big wrap-up of Trump's trip to the G20, but today is Russia madness all the time. So we started there. Don Jr.'s meetings with Russian lawyers and other officials trying to gather dirt on Hillary. And then we got into the ongoing military effort against ISIS in Mosul, what's happening in Syria, and the Trump administration's plans for Afghanistan. I think it's hard to focus on these hugely important issues like ISIS, Iraq, Syria when all this madness is in the news, but Derek gave us a great perspective on both, so check it out. With me this week on Pod Save the World is Derek Chollet. Derek was, from 2012 to 15, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs. That means he dealt with defense policy towards Europe. That includes NATO, the Middle East, Africa, and the entire Western Hemisphere. So big job there. Before joining the Pentagon, Derek was at the White House as Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Strategic Planning on the National Security Staff. And before that, he was Deputy Director of Secretary Hillary Clinton's Policy Planning Staff and a member of the Obama-Biden transition team. Derek, thanks for joining me today, man. I appreciate it.
It's great to be here, Tommy.
So, of course, as usual, what happens with the show is I pitch you on one idea, which was like, let's do a Trump trip wrap-up. And then the news cycle explodes 85 times over, including our boy Don Jr. sending some probably troubling emails to some Russian counterparts. So I figured we would start there instead, just because I hope you can help us make sense of this, given your expertise in defense and campaigns.
Let's just go right to the pain.
Let's go. Okay. So after months of denials by the Trump administration that there was any contact with Russian officials during the campaign, it came out today that Donald Trump Jr. took a meeting with a Russian lawyer after being promised information that, quote, would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia and would be very useful to your father. They added, this is obviously very high level and sensitive information, but it is part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. Feels pretty bad. This is brand new. You know, it's hard for me to get my bearings when I read things like that, but I'm wondering, you know, to begin, what do you make of all this?
Well, I mean, it's hard to get your bearings. I mean, it's pretty shocking, to be honest. I mean, it's you know, it's because it's not just that he was meeting with individuals who happened to be Russian, right? I mean, I think we that was clear. The way the story's evolved in the last 72 hours has been a little head spinning. But it went from, okay, he met with some Russians, unclear whether they were how they were connected to the government or not, to then what we have now is black and white, clear as day evidence that it was his understanding he was going to meet individuals who had Russian government information that could be provided to him that would be damaging to Clinton. And I think for many of us who've been watching this unfold over the last several months or more, almost a year now, actually, from when these first allegations first arose, there's at least an assumption of unwitting collusion, meaning that perhaps people around the Trump organization or as part of the Trump organization met with folks who maybe unwittingly were working on behalf of the Russians, and there was collusion there. But there's no ambiguity based on this email chain that was released about who was doing what on whose behalf. I mean, it says these Russian government officials, Russian government lawyer, even is the way this person was described. So it's pretty startling. I mean, this is something Tommy, you and I have worked on campaigns before.
Right.
What the Trump guys are trying to say is that, look, Oppo research, this is nothing new. This is what happens all the time. I mean, if first of all, I've never been even directly or even heard of a foreign government trying to provide this kind of information. And if that ever had occurred in any campaign I'd been a part of, one of the first calls you'd make is to the FBI to say something extremely fishy is going on here.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah, I mean, your point about the sort of unwitting collusion, I think for a while people thought, well, maybe sort of bumbling Carter Page accidentally took meetings with the wrong people, or shady Paul Manafort, tried to make a quick buck with the wrong people in Ukraine. This is very witting. And to your point earlier about opposition research, absolutely opposition research is standard operating procedure in any campaign. That said, I mean, I remember in 2008 there were bright lines drawn by Barack Obama, David Plouffe, David Axelrod, the senior people in the campaign, about what we would and would not look into or talk about or use. And you would think that foreign government information would be part of that, would be firmly on the wrong side of that line. But so you worked in government, you did a bunch of campaigns, you were a foreign policy expert. I mean, did you have foreign officials trying to take meetings with you during Kerry Edwards or any other campaigns? And did you have those conversations? Like, how did you draw the line between gathering information to get policy, to build policies, or while preventing sort of inappropriate conversations?
Yeah, no, and I think what's happening as a result of this, particularly because the Trump people or their supporters are trying to kind of throw a lot of kind of chaff up into the air to kind of distract us from what's going on, and because it's absolutely true that campaign officials will have interactions with foreign government officials, more likely. It's folks based here in Washington, here at U.S. embassies or at their embassies here in Washington, or perhaps if foreign officials are traveling in the United States at that time, and they'll reach out to the foreign policy advisors of the campaign to understand the campaign's position on issues. Obviously they want to try to establish relationships, thinking that if these people win, then of course those folks could be in positions inside the government.
Right.
So my experience is, yes, there was interaction with foreign governments. It typically, though, in my experience, were interactions with governments that were friendly to us. I mean,
right.
It's not uncommon to have talk to the Brits or talk to the French or talk to the Japanese or the Koreans or longstanding allies. Pretty unusual, and I don't recall any situation that I was a part of where you would talk to the Russians, for example. Yes, it's true that campaigns will interact with foreign governments, but not foreign governments that are seeking to undermine our election, for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Very unusual.
That's a good point, right? You see a lot of campaign trips to Israel or
absolutely.
UK.
And again, those tend to be more informational exchanges. Certainly nothing of what we're seeing right now, not even close of this. I've got some information that is going to undermine your opponent. Nothing of that nature. It's more, what is your candidate's position on, issue XYZ that I care about, or let me, as a foreign government official, tell you about our position on policy XYZ.
Yeah.
And typically those are handled, I mean, for the most part, I think on both sides, Republican and Democrat, in past elections responsibly. And oftentimes these are relationships that one may have made outside of government, or, folks, for those of us who had served in government before, perhaps people you had interacted with before. We don't want to, in criticizing what's happening to Trump, you don't want to sort of paint with too broad of a brush, meaning saying that so forever, campaigns would never interact with foreigners. That's not smart. But what's happened here is just so beyond the pale.
Yeah.
It's just a total. It's not an apples and oranges comparison. It's an apples and some totally different comparison.
It's so funny listening to a reasonable person like yourself try to be charitable to them, because I do this too. It's like I struggle so mightily.
Well, I mean, it's just batshit crazy. It is. It's just.
It is indeed. Okay. Last question for you on this. You did a lot of work at the Pentagon on policy towards Europe, policy towards NATO, which is of extreme acute interest to the Russian government. They would likely collect on someone in your position, their military, their intelligence services. I'm guessing you got your fair share of counter-intel briefings. I mean, what's your sort of, without any real knowledge beyond what we've both read, take on the tactic here? Is sort of running an intermediary like this, an acquaintance of Trump's, a lawyer to launder Russian government information? Does that sound like something that would be a known tactic or something we would watch out for?
Yeah, it sounds very plausible. Again, not knowing the specifics of what was going on in this case beyond what we've all just been reading over the last, it's been released here, but it absolutely. I mean, look, Putin has shown, whether it's in specific intelligence operations or in situations like his invasion of Ukraine several years ago, which he uses cutouts, he uses intermediaries. He tries to throw up enough ambiguity that he can claim that he has nothing to do with it, right? And so. Even though the facts show otherwise, he can have plausible deniability.
Right.
So I'm sure in this instance, I have not seen the Russian government's reaction to the release of this information about Donald Trump Jr. today. They've reacted in the past on this about denying anything, but I assume they'll say, "Look, we had nothing to do with any of this. These were just folks who." We're part of the government. They were not formal officials purporting to have this information. We had nothing to do with it. Yeah. I don't believe that. And it's sort of like when Trump last week had this meeting with Putin in Germany and said, we talked about the Russian interference question, and we're moving on. I mean, of the people in that room, and there were 6 of them. 2 of them were interpreters, and 4, Tillerson, Trump, Putin, and Lavrov, the foreign minister. I mean, other than the interpreters, no one in that room has any credibility on the Russian hacking issue.
Right.
So, we shouldn't believe anybody what they're saying about that of the four folks in that room.
Yeah, it's I don't know how as a reporter you bother going to a briefing. You quote these denials anymore. I mean, they just have shredded their credibility. But
yeah.
More nerdy foreign policy coming up on Pod Save the World. Pod Save the World is brought to you by LendingTree. When you go to the bank to get your mortgage, it is confusing. John, I think you could probably tell people a little bit about that. You don't know enough about APRs, not even sure what that means, or what the Fed is doing, or might do, but you're likely to get totally ripped off or screwed if you're not well informed. LendingTree has changed all of that. Whew. Here's the thing, guys. The average LendingTree customer can save $20,000 over the life of their own. That's a ton of money.
It is.
But that's the average. Half of their customers could save even more. It's like shopping for flights online, only you're shopping for the best mortgage offers for you. Rates always go up and down, but regardless of what's happening with the rates, you can always get the right offer for you with LendingTree.com. That's LendingTree.com/crookedworld to get our code. LendingTree.com/crookedworld. LendingTree LLC, NMLS number 1136. Terms and conditions apply.
All I wanted to say is LendingTree seems great. The one thing it can't solve for is the generational theft that the baby boomers are engaging in through the tax code and rising home prices.
End of ad.
Keep your own politics to yourself.
I'm not keep my politics to myself.
Yeah,
Imagine.
It's Pod Save America.
I know, I get it. I get it, John. I always get it.
So the other huge event in the news the past few days and this week is the recapturing of Mosul. The Iraqi Prime Minister al-Abadi declared recently that Mosul had been recaptured from ISIS. The images out of Mosul are stark. I mean, the city
it's like Dresden.
It's Dresden,
Terrible.
which was bombed to smithereens in World War II.
Yeah.
It is flattened. The human suffering is unbelievable. But I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the significance of this military success against ISIS.
Well, this is a watershed moment, and it's one that, just to kind of bring people back in time, I mean, it was 3 years ago this summer when ISIS first took Mosul and began the quick march towards Baghdad, and I was serving in the Pentagon at the time, and it was a harrowing moment where for a period of time we thought we were watching Iraq unravel completely, because Mosul's a major city in Iraq, and the fact that ISIS had taken that over relatively easily at the time was quite alarming.
Can you just talk about that for 1 second, Derek? Because basically the Iraqi security forces, after a decade plus of training and equipment from the United States, just turned
melted
and ran,
away,
right? Yeah,
basically, and there's a variety of reasons for that. The U.S., after withdrawing from Iraq in 2011, which was something the Iraqis wanted us to do, was to withdraw. They did not have for several years. They didn't have the United States by their side, helping them stay trained up. And then also the leadership of Iraq, after we withdrew in 2011, was very sectarian. So sort of played on the differences of the people of Iraq, particularly between Sunni and Shia. And as a result, we had a kind of an atrophy of the Iraqi security forces, which then when ISIS rose up and went into Mosul, they basically just folded like a house of cards.
Right.
So that's when the beginning of the ISIS campaign started 3 years ago this summer. I think it's also really important for your listeners to remember that when President Obama started this campaign, this military campaign 3 years ago, he made very clear at the time that this was going to be we would win militarily. We would be able to have the kind of success we've seen in Mosul today, but it was going to take time.
Yeah.
In fact, he said it would take about 2 to 3 years, and guess what? It took about 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was reflecting back on this. It was 2 years ago, almost to the day. Right after July 4th, 2015. President Obama went to the Pentagon for a briefing of his senior military leadership on the progress in the ISIS campaign, and then delivered a public speech at the Pentagon, an update on the ISIL campaign. And he made very clear in that statement, he talked mainly about the progress that the United States and its partners had been making in Iraq and Syria against ISIS, saying we had a long way to go militarily, but that we were making steady progress. But he made very clear that no amount of military force was going to end the terror that is ISIS, that unless it was matched by a broader effort, and the political and economic questions that really address the underlying conditions that created ISIS, and that's now where we find ourselves.
Right. Was that briefing in the tank, Derek?
The briefing itself was not in the tank, which is where the Joint Chiefs, that's their conference room. It was in the Secretary's conference room, and then Secretary of Defense's conference room, and then he gave a public statement, I believe, in the Pentagon press room. Yeah, your listeners should just Google Obama ISIS July 2015, and you'll see his full speech.
I just wanted to name check the tank because it was just the coolest name for a conference room I think ever. I mean, I'm not sure why it's special.
For those of you who've never been in the tank, you go in there. It's just a conference room. It doesn't look anything like a tank.
It's like the Situation Room, right? The Situation Room is 3 or 4 actually different rooms, 3 or 4
exactly
that are just secure facilities where you can do a video conference. But anyway,
but I mean, so I think what's interesting. I mean, the Trump what's happened in Mosul in the last few days has nothing to do with Donald Trump, to be clear. I mean, this was the military campaign that had been designed and begun under President Obama that the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Mattis, has continued with in the first 7 months of this year. And we actually, I mean, I remember at the very beginning when this military plan was being developed, we knew that we would eventually come to this day, that eventually, just given the capability of the United States and our efforts working with our partners, that we would take back Mosul. Mm-hmm. It would be a long, hard fight, but it would happen. But the question is, what comes next?
Right.
And this is where it has been deafening silence coming out of the Trump administration. It's unclear that they have any plan of what to do. This is something that was acutely on the Obama administration's mind as it was leaving office, knowing that we were going to get to this point where we would be able to militarily liberate these places. But then what comes next is the hard work and the significant resources that are going to be required to stabilize what are devastated cities and towns in Iraq. And this is where we're going to need strong diplomacy, and unfortunately we're getting the opposite of that right now. We're going to need effective development experts, and we're going to need international unity, and right now we're falling short on all three.
So staying with Iraq, I mean, at least there's a government, right? At least there's someone we can work with, unlike Syria, right, where it's Assad and ISIS
exactly.
sort of dividing the place up. What would you recommend that the Trump administration do in Syria over the next 6-12 months? I'm sorry, in Iraq.
In Iraq. Well, I mean, look, the key is to continue to ensure that with our military trainers, and it's important, again, for your listeners, remember what the U.S. has been doing in Iraq is direct military action, mainly through airstrikes and then some special forces work. But mainly we're training and equipping the Iraqi security forces. So the liberation of Mosul was done by Iraqi troops with our support, with our U.S. air power, U.S. intelligence, U.S. equipment in many cases. But it was the Iraqis actually on the ground doing the work. Mm-hmm. So it's important for us to continue to work with them, assuming the Iraqis, and they do want us to continue to work with them, but to make sure that they are, have the capabilities that they need to stabilize these parts of Iraq that have been liberated, and then also to help lead the world. Which again, I'm not very confident we're going to do this, but we've got to help lead the world in what is going to be a massive effort that's required to help stabilize these places. It's going to require. Probably, I think recent estimates I've seen, it's $750 or nearly $1 billion in reconstruction support that's required. Again, a lot of political development support, and we all when the ISIS going back when the ISIS campaign started, we knew that we would be able to break the back of the Islamic State, because actually. Taking down states is something the U.S. military has shown multiple times that it's capable of doing in the last 15 years.
If you're holding territory, we can figure out a way.
Right. You're right. Cutting off the finances, taking guys off the battlefield, taking down the leadership structure. We can take down states. The challenge for us is when ISIS goes back to being an insurgency, which is where we are now.
Right.
And that's a harder problem to try to tackle, and it's not something the U.S. there's easy answers to at all. The problem is, again, we are kind of undercutting the tools that we have to try to get at that part of the problem by what this administration's done just in only 6 months in office.
So I mean, it's interesting. I agree. It's like in a weird way, this was the easy part, and easy is by no means easy, right? But your point about the longer-term commitment and what it'll take to get Iraq to a place that's self-sustaining and safe for the people who live there is, I saw something by David Petraeus, who was talking about our commitment to Afghanistan the other day. Yep. And he drew a comparison to Korea, where we've been for decades, and we have 28,500 troops there since 1953. So, I mean, have we all been thinking about Iraq wrong for the last 5-10 years? I mean, was thinking we needed a time frame for withdrawal and capacity building for these forces just naive? Or is Petraeus right about that time frame? Like, how do you look at this now, having worked on this for so long?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, and Iraq is obviously each of these cases kind of you have to take on their own. In Iraq, the story of our withdrawal from Iraq in 2011 and then the reintroduction of U.S. military forces into Iraq in 2014 has been highly litigated. It's important, I think, for people to remember that the Iraqis have a vote here, and they were willing to see us leave in 2011. Right? They had been through a searing experience, clearly, in the what had happened in the previous decade. And it's actually a different story in Afghanistan, where the U.S. has been in Afghanistan, of course, since 2001. We still have north of 10,000 troops there. We're adding, it looks about to be around 4,000 more.
Right.
And I know we're going to get to Afghanistan in a little more. But look back, if anyone in 2011 or 2001 had said U.S. troops are going to be in Afghanistan for the next 16 years plus, because I don't see them leaving anytime soon. We're starting to look a little bit like Korea, right? Now, different circumstance. Afghanistan is a pretty tough terrain and far more dangerous than Korea was in the 50s and 60s in terms of day-to-day life for our folks out there deployed. But I think these sorts of long-term investments are ones that we should be prepared to make. But it is also important that we have partners on the ground, and I think this is a key kind of thing to keep in mind, which is in both cases now in Afghanistan and Iraq, we have governments who want us there, who want to work with us, who want our help, and that's critical to success. And I think what we found ourselves in 2011, and I was part of the decisions that were taken about our withdrawal troops, is we had an Iraqi government at the time that was more than happy for us to leave and really didn't want us to stay. And that seemed like a recipe for disaster as well.
Yeah. You're listening to Pod Save the World. Stick around. There's more great show coming your way. Pod Save the World is brought to you by Postmates. Guys, we love Postmates. If you don't have Postmates, download the app right now and put in the code CROOKED, and you get $50 off your first order. That is $50 in your pocket. Postmates they don't just deliver delicious foods, okay? If you need a whiteboard, if you need anything for your home,
you might need a whiteboard.
If you need a lamp, if you need a flashlight.
Tommy's not sure what's going on out there, but he knows what people need, and they need whiteboards.
If you gave your dog a haircut down to the skin and it needs a jacket to block the sun, you could probably get that.
Okay, Pundy got a puppy cut. Let's all calm down. No, I'm sorry, a summer cut. A summer cut. And dogs get summer cuts. It's a great thing. The dogs are super happy. I'm sorry that you value some weird aesthetic notion as how Leo should look to you, more than Leo's
hair. Comfortable.
She's soft so that Pundit is in a great place haircut-wise.
In conclusion, if you shave your dog, use Postmates. Pod Save the World is also brought to you by Blue Apron. Blue Apron's mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone. Blue Apron achieves this by supporting a more sustainable food system, setting the highest standards for ingredients, and building a community of home chefs. Those who spend a lot at restaurants or high-end grocery stores can now spend under $10 per person for a delicious meal. Featured upcoming meals include seared chicken and creamy pasta salad with summer squash and sweet peppers. I literally ate that yesterday.
Wow.
Really?
Yep. Creamy shrimp rolls with quick pickles and the sweet potato wedges.
Ooh.
And fresh basil fettuccine pasta with sweet corn and cubanelle pepper. For less than $10 per person per meal, Blue Apron delivers seasonal recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals. Check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/crookedworld. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So do not wait. That's blueapron.com/crookedworld. Blue Apron, better way to cook.
A better way to cook.
Turning quickly to Syria, during the President Trump's bilateral meeting with President Putin, he announced a ceasefire in southwestern Syria. So far, that ceasefire appears to be holding. There have been any number of unsuccessful ceasefire efforts in Syria. Secretary Kerry brokered a number of them that just didn't hold.
Yeah.
This one seems unique in that Russia is driving it. What do you make of this effort? Do you think that there's a hope here that this could improve the situation on the ground?
Yeah, look, there's a hope. I mean, one has to always hope. You're right to point out, though, that we have seen many ceasefires come and go over the course of the last 6 years in Syria. This, because it's of where it is, the role that Russia's playing, in particular, that this could be different. This is a part of Syria that, in the southwest part, where it's pretty far from the fighting that we've been most engaged in eastern Syria. Mm-hmm. and the northern part of Syria, where Aleppo is. And it's a part of Syria that there's been a lot of focus on recently because our Jordanian partners who are part of this agreement are very focused on what's happening in the southwest part of Syria. Our Israeli friends are very nervous about what's going on in that part of Syria because that's the part of Syria that's adjacent to Israel. So there's a lot of players who want to see this ceasefire succeed. There's a concern about Iran using this part of Syria as gaining influence in this part of Syria. So, it's been, I think 24 hours or a little over 24 hours since the ceasefire took effect as we're talking today. So I'm hopeful, but I'm not confident.
Yeah.
It's a pretty tricky deal, and there's been some reporting about the U.S. military not fully kind of being caught surprised by some elements of the ceasefire. So I'm unclear what's happened there.
Yeah, you're being very generous.
Something, by the way, I don't think this was something that was much discussed by Trump and Putin. I think a lot of the work was being done at lower levels over the past several weeks, and this was one of these things they saved for the Putin-Trump meeting to be able to announce as a deliverable.
Got it. Yeah, you're being very generous. According to BuzzFeed, the U.S. military had received no guidance on how to enforce a ceasefire, even as they were talking about this as a success.
But the other thing is I don't think we're really operating much there.
Right.
Most of where the U.S. military is operating, if folks look at a map of Syria, is more kind of at the central and the eastern part, not the southwestern part. So,
Got it. Is the heavy lifting here to get the Russian buy-in, and we shouldn't worry as much about the execution, or how do you view this?
Well, I think maintaining Russian buy-in is going to be key. I think the question in my mind is how much control do the Russians actually have over things there? It's one of these $1 million questions. The Russians are not all powerful, so getting them to try to cooperate is hard enough, but then there's always the question of how much leverage do they actually have, right? And so this will be the additional test, is whether they've got the will to enforce this ceasefire and to force their friends to stand down. But then there's also whether they got the way, whether they've actually got the ability to do it.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I'll be watching for over the next week or so. But
yeah,
I think I've seen this too many times to get to be be hopeful. I'm hopeful because I want it. Of course, we want a ceasefire. I'm just not optimistic. It's kind of the whole the Charlie Brown thing, Lucy and the football.
Yeah.
We've seen this. We've seen them pull the football several times already. So
yeah, ultimately Assad is their guy. They want to continue to prop him up, and we don't like Assad and we don't like ISIS, and it's hard to see how that's a big opening for cooperation, but hope springs eternal.
Exactly.
The last question I want to ask you is about Afghanistan. According to the New York Times on Tuesday, Steve Bannon pitched General Mattis on a plan to send the private security firm Blackwater into Afghanistan instead of more U.S. troops. Yeah. There's apparently a way to give Trump more options to keep his promise to put America first. I think this sounds crazy. Blackwater was a disaster in Iraq. There was a horrific incident where a dozen plus, I think it was 17 civilians were shot by Blackwater forces. I've seen no evidence that using a private army saves taxpayers money or would be more effective in implementing policy, but you are an expert. You've probably worked in and around these private security forces and obviously a lot with the U.S. military. What's your take on that story?
Well, it's kind of hard to know where to begin. Look, at the most charitable interpretation, which is that, as I said, we're going to be in Afghanistan one way or another for a long time, right? And Afghanistan, for folks who've never been, it's an incredibly insecure environment. And private security contractors are absolutely critical to functioning safely in Afghanistan, whether you're there as a U.S. government official, you're there as a journalist, you're there as an NGO providing development assistance. There are private security contractors kind of all over the place, right? And they keep a lot of people safe, and we rely on them. So there's nothing inherently bad about security contractors. And the other thing is, it's perfectly fine for a government to have creative ideas, to try to explore every option. And And certainly the U.S. military even uses private security contractors because that's a way that it can keep its military footprint at a minimum, but still be secure enough to be able to do the work. Okay. But the way this is kind of all going down, according to the New York Times, raises a lot of flags. I mean, clearly, Eric Prince, who used to run Blackwater, now the firm has another name that I'm forgetting.
Evil Corp, I think. Something like that.
I forget what it's called. But it's, he has a vested interest in having, a business interest in having this, be taken over by security contractors. He himself is someone who's, has some, is a political supporter, and there's kind of raises a lot of ethical flags in kind of getting this kind of advice from him. The Steve Bannon role in all of this is very interesting and alarming. Much was made by the quote-unquote adults in the Trump administration, and I use quotes around adults purposely, that people like Bannon had been banished from the national security decision-making system.
Right.
But this suggests that is not true.
I mean, just
obviously.
Pausing on that, could you imagine David Axelrod walking up to Bob Gates and saying, hey, instead of sending 10,000 Marines to Helmand province, what if we sent
And Tommy,
Blackwater?
It's worse than that, because it's not just like a great, hey, I had this idea on my own. It's, hey, I've spent all this time consulting with folks outside of government who have a vested financial interest in a certain policy outcome. What do you think?
Right.
I mean, it's not just I read an interesting, think tank report, and what do you think of this? I've actively brought folks from outside of government in who have a vested interest.
It's like they had a contest to solicit the worst possible ideas, and this is where they landed.
It's not, I can only imagine what General Mattis's reaction was to all of this.
Just get out of my face.
So.
Yeah. Okay, I think we both landed on probably not a good idea. Derek, thank you so much for doing the show. I know this was like the craziest day possible to have these conversations, and thank you for providing insight not only to this Russia madness, but all the really, really important things that are happening behind the scenes that are not getting the attention they deserve, like Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. So thanks.
Yeah, no, well, look, I appreciate you doing it, and it's just a good reminder that the world is not stopping while we sort our shit out.
No, it is not.
So, it's a pretty disturbing time.
Yeah, it sure is. And with that, thanks,
all right.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tommy. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.